Hey, what's going on, roleplayers? It's the Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. So tell me if this scene seems a little familiar. Okay, players, at the end of our last session, the Great White Dragon started its attack. So what is everyone doing? I go into a rage and start swinging my mighty great axe. I cast a spell to protect us from the dragon's breath. I sneak around to the dragon's flank and try to find a weakness in its hide. Alright, that all sounds great. Monk, what are you doing? I punched the dragon. You punched the dragon. Yeah, I punched the dragon. Okay. I mean, you've got some magical monk weapons. Do you not want to use those? Nah, I punch it. Yeah, but punching! Okay, so that's a little over the top, but I think it illustrates my point. In a world where you've got fireballs and dragons and enchanted weapons and stuff, sometimes the monk can feel like it breaks the immersion a little bit. The monk isn't doing anything wrong. The monk is doing exactly what monks do. But the problem is, in a world where you need ballistas and great war machines, entire armies, and powerful spellcasters to take down dragons, having one character walk up to it and punch it could be just a little bit difficult to rationalize. I think this is why a lot of the monk classes get unusual capabilities, like the ability to summon fire or to use necrotic damage, or they have weapon specialist talent trees that they can go down, because just your standard punching monk can be a little bit difficult for the other players to swallow, I think. Don't get me wrong, I like monk as much as the next class, but sometimes it can be a little bit jarring, and I feel that's why perhaps unarmed fighters and grapplers don't really get as much love as they deserve. So have a look at your screen. This guy looks like a capable enough monk. He looks tough, but perhaps not very intimidating. This character is a lot more imposing. It would definitely give you pause for thought, but still probably not much of a fantasy setting character. What about this character? He's got the armor, the spikes, the gauntlets, the chains, the frightening mask. This character might actually look like he belongs. These three characters all have the same thing in common. They're all unarmed strikers, but if I'm honest, this is the guy I want on my team. The point is, in the aforementioned world where you have fireballs and armored knights and monstrous creatures, for some reason this character doesn't look out of place, and I don't think it would really break my immersion too much if it started to attack something up close and personal. So I don't want to drag this out too much, but do you see my point? Do you understand where I'm coming from? Sometimes I think people just can't really comprehend the monk or unarmed fighters in general, and I think it just puts them off a little bit. But I wonder if Wizards perhaps thinks the same thing, because there's not a lot of support for strikers and grappling characters. When it comes to classes and feats and abilities, the list is pretty limited, and you have to be careful even when multiclassing, because so many options require you to make a weapon attack, whereas unarmed attacks are something very different. So what options do we have? Well, we have Monk as a class. We've got the Tavern Brawler feat, which is okay for virtually any character, so that's an interesting starting point. There's the unarmed fighting style, which is specific to fighters. There's the grappling strike, which is specific to battle master fighters. And then there's Giant's Might, which is, again, for fighters. That last one is specifically for rune knights. There are a few potential options here and there in other areas of the books, but these seem to be your absolute starting points. And sometimes I don't want to play a monk, and sometimes I don't want to play a fighter. Sometimes I'd like to be something a little bit different. So often when I've built a character, if I've chosen a character from media and I've wanted to recreate them using these rules, I either go for monk or I'll go for battlemaster. And I just want a change sometimes. I just want something different. But at the same time as having variety, I also don't want to be a burden to my other players. I want to be effective. So what can we possibly do? We want our variety, we want to satisfy the urge to grab things, but we don't want to be useless in-game either. If we look at the differences between weapon attacks and unarmed attacks, apart from the variations in damage and damage types, Nothing's really changing, at least from a rules perspective. But if you're going to keep up with the other characters in the group who have that warrior ethos, you're going to at least invest a couple of feats into your unarmed strikes so that you can do comparable damage to their basic weapon attacks. Also, what about grapple specifically? What exactly is it doing? Well, if you look at the grappled condition, there's 3 points that it makes, and 2 of them are about when the condition ends. What it really just does is, it reduces the creature's speed to 0. That isn't really very much. So what is a grappler's role then? Well, a grappler's role is to control space. The grappler's function is to immobilize characters, to prevent them from getting a footing, and to restrict their options when it comes to combat. Alright, let's start building an unarmed combatant / grappler without using monk, without using fighter, and let's just see what we can come up with. We'll go with human for the sake of ease for the moment, because at least you get the extra feat, and I think we're going to need a lot of them if we want to make someone who actually works well. So the first thing on the agenda is going to be Fighting Initiate. So this is a feat that you can use to get a fighting style when you wouldn't normally be entitled to one. So of course, unarmed fighting is what we're going to pick. So this fighting style gives you 1d6 plus your strength modifier in bludgeoning damage, but if you're not using any weapons or items in either hand, then those d6s become d8s instead. The other nice thing about this fighting style is the 1d4 damage that you can do at the beginning of each of your turns automatically, as long as you're grappling a creature. The nice thing about the 1d4 damage is that you can deal it, you don't have to. So it changes the dynamic and it changes your role when you're grappling. You can choose to restrain someone or grapple someone without dealing damage, but if it's something you intend to go into combat with later anyway, then you can just deal extra damage here and there whenever you're grappling. So you've got choices that you can work with. So with our unarmed damage covered, let's look at our grappling. Well, I think Tavern Brawler is up next. So you get a choice of a +1 bonus to either your strength or constitution. That's always going to be useful, so don't sniff at that. The 1d4 damage on unarmed strikes is completely superfluous, as it's overwritten by our fighting style. So we're getting twice as much damage essentially out of that anyway. So unfortunately that's a part of the feat that we're not going to be using. The proficiency with improvised weapons is also something that we don't technically care about, but if we want to mix it up a little and do something a bit different now and again, at least we have that option. It's there, but it's not required. The real prize for us, though, is the ability to get into a grapple after an unarmed attack by using a bonus action to attempt a grapple check. That's the really important part about Tavern Brawler for this particular build. Not only does it give us an additional chance for a grapple, but it actually gives us a differing method of getting into the grapple. And this is going to be important because there's some interesting interactions coming up with some of the class rules from what we'll be using, which make it preferable in certain scenarios. This is where your grappler starts to take on more of their identity when they get their 8th level feat. You can take the ability score improvement if you feel that you need it. So if you need more strength or you need more constitution, that's an option. If you want to go for a feat, however, a couple of good choices are grappler or crusher. The grappler feat will allow you advantage on attack rolls when you're grappling a creature. It'll also allow you to potentially attempt a pin maneuver, which restrains the creature, which does slightly more than just base grappling on its own. Crusher, on the other hand, is one of those feats that is more of a space controlling feat, because it allows you to use your damage to push the creature back and away from you. So Grappler gives you an advantage on your attack rolls when grappling, which by extension gives you an increased chance to do damage. Now, pinning a creature isn't always in your best interest, but it is an important part of this grappling maneuver. So you're not getting the advantage because it's being counteracted by the disadvantage of being restrained, but the same is also true for your opponent. So between you and your opponent, your attacks are on equal footing. However, because you're in a party, the party will get advantage attacks against that creature, and that creature will get disadvantage against your party as well. So that's always something to bear in mind. Crusher, on the other hand, is one of those feats that you use if you want to be more of a striker character, because again, it allows you to create space, it allows you to push a creature back. The other important thing to note about Crusher is that it works with bludgeoning damage that comes from an attack, but not specifically from weapon attacks, so it's got a nice synergy with your unarmed strikes. So in short, the Grappler feat is for grapplers who want to control the opponent's speed, and the Crusher feat is for strikers who want to control space. Alright, so we've got our feats, and now it's time to look at what classes we're going to apply. Now we said we didn't want to use Fighter, and we said we didn't want to use Monk. So I'm going to go with Barbarian for a start, and I'm going to go with the Path of the Battle Rager, which is something that you probably don't see very often. It's from Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Now, a word of warning. Technically, this class is restricted to dwarfs only. However, your DM can lift this restriction to better suit the campaign. The restriction exists for the Forgotten Realms, and it might not apply to your DM setting. Well, because I am an absolute chad lad who doesn't play by anyone's rules, not even my own, that's exactly what I'm going to do. As a 3rd level Battle Rager, you get the ability to use Spiked Armor, and you can use it as a weapon. While you're wearing Spiked Armor and you're raging, you can use a bonus action to make one melee attack with your armor spikes against a target within 5 feet of you. If the attack hits, the spikes deal 1d4 piercing damage. You use your strength modifier for the attack and damage rolls. Additionally, when you use the attack action to grapple a creature, the target takes 3 piercing damage if your grapple check succeeds. So how do all these things interact with each other? And how do they interact with the abilities that the Barbarian gets at a base level? So let's start by looking at Rage. Rage is something that you can do as a bonus action, and you get to have resistance against slashing, bludgeoning, and piercing attacks. This is particularly useful because the thing that you're going to be grappling with is probably going to want to target you more than anything else. You also get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. Grappling is an ability check, so having advantage on that means you're more likely to succeed at your grapple. So this is something we really want. The final part of Rage gives you a bonus to damage. However, it's only on weapon damage rolls, so we're not going to get it for our unarmed attacks. But it's not completely wasted, as I'll go into now. So next up is Battle Rager Armor, and this is where the interactions start to get a little weird. So the first main thing it does is give you an extra weapon attack in the form of piercing damage via the armor spikes. So you can still use your unarmed attacks, but you also have access to a weapon attack. So it's kind of like a slightly weaker version of a Frenzy Barbarian. So we have access to a weapon attack, but we have no weapons in our hands, so we still get the full 1d8 for our unarmed strikes. So if we go full striking by using a bonus action for the piercing damage, even though the piercing attack is slightly less damage, it's starting to level out a little bit because it's getting the additional bonus from Rage. Here's another curious interaction with Battle Rager Armor, and it's what I was alluding to earlier. If you use an action to grapple a creature, you'll get the 3 piercing damage if you're successful. But if you use your bonus action to grapple a creature from your Tavern Brawler feat, that 3 damage from piercing will not apply. I mean, if damage is your primary goal, then it's probably worth using your unarmed strikes and then using the bonus action to get into a grapple. Because if you're grappling from the start, you just get the 3 damage. If you're attacking with your unarmed strikes, you get your strength plus a d8 roll. Let's say we're using the grappler feat, and we've just grappled a creature and we want to pin it in the next round. The next round we're automatically going to get 1d4 damage, but because we have to make another grapple check in order to restrain the creature with the pin, that successful grapple check also allows us to use that additional 3 piercing damage from our Battle Rager Armor. The reason this works is because pinning a target requires an action as well as a grapple attempt, so it satisfies the conditions of the Battle Rager Armor ability. This actually works out nicely for the Battle Rager, as just by getting a tighter grip on your target, you're dealing between an extra 4 and 7 damage. So we're not doing too bad here. We've got consistent damage for striking, and we've got consistent damage for grappling. So the next thing I want to try is a few levels of Ranger, and I think I'm going to go with Hunter. And I want to have the Canny ability, which comes from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, because this is an option that allows you to have what is essentially expertise. So if you're using expertise, you can apply it to your athletics roll, because that's what grappling is based off of. So you'd then get double proficiency. That combined with your barbarian rage giving you advantage on strength rolls means that virtually nothing is getting out of that grapple. So the next ability I want to use is Hunter's Prey, and specifically the Colossus Slayer. Now there are other ranger archetypes we could potentially use, but this one seemed to make the most sense. So when it comes finally time for us to cash out our damage, again, we still have access to that additional piercing damage from our armor spikes that we can use while we're raging. And because it counts as a weapon attack, you get access to the Colossus Slayer ability. So again, we're still able to strike unarmed, we're still able to grapple if we want, but we do have access to that weapon attack, which allows us to then proc that special ability from the Ranger class. This allows us to increase our damage to a significant enough level to keep us relevant enough when fighting alongside the other Fighter Ethos characters. So all in all, that's my idea. What do you think? Is it nice to not have to rely on Fighter and Monk all the time? Do you think it has the potential to work? Does it perhaps offer up some new and exciting abilities or pathways that you didn't consider before? Whatever your thoughts are, stick them in the comments below. I think this could be potentially a lot of fun. I wouldn't hesitate to actually make one of these and put it into a game. I think I'd really enjoy playing it as well. If you think you'd like playing the character like this, why not like the video? Perhaps put your comments in the section down below. And if you're not already subscribed, why not consider doing so? And with all that being said, I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.